Hello, Atmore. It's the Lloyd and Friends Show. And now here's your host, Lloyd Alberton.
Good morning, Atmore. This is Lloyd Albriton. And this morning, I am talking to none other than Mr. Trey Smith, one of our native sons from here in Atmore. And he's grown up now, and he's engaged. And so I have on the line with him I've seen a picture of her, so I'm going to say the lovely fiance on the other line. So if both of you want to say good morning, have at it. Trey?
Good morning. Thanks for having us on. Always good to talk to people from back home in Atmore.
Stephanie, where are you from?
Hi, yes, it's so exciting to join, and thank you for welcoming me both to the radio broadcast and just the city of Atmore has been incredibly welcoming. But yes, I am dialing in from Washington, D.C. I grew up in Maryland and have really spent my entire life in what we call the DMV, between D.C., Maryland, and Virginia.
Oh, okay. Well, you're a big city girl, and you found this small town guy. You must have been pretty impressed with him, huh?
I don't know. Part of me thinks it's the opposite. Every day that I meet somebody new that knows Trey, I feel like I'm luckier and luckier by the day. That's for sure. But I certainly love the combo and love being able to hop back and forth between the world of DC and the world of Atmore, Alabama.
Well, Trey's kind of a legend here in Atmore. I don't know if he told you that.
So that's the thing, is he didn't tell me that because he's a pretty humble guy. But as I have a couple conversations and do some Google searches, I absolutely came to that conclusion on my own. That's for sure.
Well, I grew up here in Atmore, and I have lived here, and I've lived away in other places in my career, and came back to this area early part of 2008. And being a kind of a writer myself, I've written a couple books, and I love to write newspaper editorial type stuff as well. Naturally, I picked up the newspaper, and I saw this young kid named Trey Smith writing political columns. And I read that every week. He was just so astute. It was so advanced. And a good friend of mine, Bonnie Bartel Latino, I was talking to Bonnie, and I said, Bonnie, I'm not sure this kid is writing this. This is way too... How old is he? I think he started this in junior high, right, Trey?
We started ninth grade year, yeah.
Ninth grade year. And so I said, I'm not so sure this kid is writing this. Somebody must be writing it for him. And Bonnie said, no, I assure you he is writing it. And so I became even more fascinated as I read Trey's political analysis. And I guess, would you call that an op-ed, opinion editorial? I guess that's what you were...
It really was. It was kind of an op-ed. It was my first ever real job that I got paid for. I remember growing up, I went to the city pool with Miss Warren every summer. I was a pretty good swimmer. I was not ever really that athletic, but one thing I could do was swim. And so my plan was, for my first job, I would be a lifeguard at the city pool the way that my mom was. And instead, I ended up writing columns for the Atmore Advance. And I think being a lifeguard would have paid better than being a writer. But for me, it was $20 a week. And then by the time I was a senior, I was able to negotiate up to $25 a week for the column. And I got it Michelle Gerlach, who I think people from Atmore know. Obviously, Mr. Gerlach used to have his restaurant downtown that was everybody loved. And
yeah, that was a great
restaurant. I would just run into her. I would show up at our congressman at the time, Joe Bonner's town hall meetings, because I wanted him to appoint me to be a page. And so I would go every time he'd come to Atmore. They'd announce it in the paper, and I'd go and just remind him that that's what I wanted to do. And so over time, Michelle Gerlach saw me at every meeting and finally said, well, Trey, why don't you just start writing a column for us in the Atmore Advance? And that's what I did.
Well, you're lucky. I've written quite a few columns for the small town papers, and I've never gotten paid anything.
There we go.
So
I was very lucky.
you're at the top of the heap if you got paid $20.
Although, I will say back then I thought, well, this will be good gas money. And gas is much more expensive now than it was when I was a teenager in 2007, 2008. It was pretty expensive back then, but I got a little bit of spending money and just, I think more importantly, had a great time, got to meet a bunch of people, work with good people at the Atmore Advance, and then, got to go around and do things in the community, just meet people and get some good writing experience under my belt.
Well, I think a lot of people in Atmore know you by that column. I'm sure you have a lot of friends that know you personally. I've never met you personally, but I sure know who you are, and I think a lot of people in Atmore know who you are as well. And I'm really excited about them actually getting to know you a little better. Bonnie says you're off the charts on your IQ, so try to try not to say anything stupid, okay?
She's a biased evaluator. She's always been so really strongly in my court. Just a good supporter, a close friend of my family's, and has helped me develop as a writer over the years. Has helped, and now that Stephanie and I are looking forward to getting married, Bonnie has hosted us in Atmore. Just helped give Stephanie a lot of background about Atmore and the community. So she's not. I love Bonnie, but she's not. She's always been so supportive and so in my corner. I have to say, when it comes to my IQ, she is biased, and so I don't. I hope that I hope that off the charts is probably not. It's really pretty normal. I think I am. I'm just blessed to have been around really smart and supportive people growing up who really helped make sure I got not just the education I needed, but sort of the worldly education that I needed. And Bonnie was one of those people.
Well, Bonnie told me you were also humble, so I'm not going to pay any attention to what you just said. Hey, I said you're off the charts. You're off the charts, okay? Now, Stephanie, don't you go away, because we're going to come back to you momentarily. I just want to lay a little background now. Trey, tell me, you've got family roots here in Atmore. I know your grandmother is Miss Juanita Smith, who taught school. Everybody seems to know who she is. Give me a little family tree on you to kind of lay the foundation. Who's your daddy?
I think we may have had a little bit of an outage there. Are you asking for Steph?
Okay. I don't know what was going on there. Okay, let me say it again. Let's lay a little foundation. You're from Atmore. I know that your grandmother is Miss Juanita Smith, who was a school teacher here in Atmore. Many people know her. Tell me a little bit about your family. Who's your daddy? That's the question I always ask people nowadays. Who's your daddy? Oh, now I know who you are.
Yeah. So my grandmother, who you mentioned, Juanita Smith, moved to Atmore. She moved, I guess, probably late 40s, maybe the early 50s. She moved from Brookhaven, Mississippi, to Atmore to teach. She had met the Lathams, who I think a lot of people know Miss Latham, a teacher for a very long time as well.
Yes, I do know.
She had met Miss Latham and her husband while in school at Southern Miss. The Lathams introduced Atmore to my grandmother. She moved and was living in the old Atmore Hotel. Ended up marrying my grandfather, who was at that time and until he retired, working at the Agriculture Experiment Station for the University of Florida in Jay, and also living conveniently at the old Atmore Hotel. So,
where was that? I don't remember the Atmore Hotel. Where was that located?
It was where United Bank is today.
Okay. All right, now I
I,
remember.
I
I
don't
kind of.
remember it either, but I've only heard about it from stories. And Stephanie and I were actually talking about this recently, how nice it must have been back in the day when people could afford to just live
In
in
a
the
hotel.
hotels. It was apparently a pretty common thing.
Yeah.
Those days are long gone. But they lived in the old Atmore Hotel, ended up getting married and moving to a house on Kearney Street, and then where my grandmother lives now. Had one son, who's my dad, Ralph Smith Jr., and I'm Ralph Smith III. Go by Trey. But on my dad's side of the family, my grandmother moved from Brookhaven. My grandfather was originally from York, South Carolina. They had one child, so although my grandmother has been very well known, I think, from teaching among her students who are still in Atmore, on my dad's side of the family, it's really just us that are in the Atmore area because it's a small family. My dad was an only child. I'm an only child. On my mom's side, my mom is from a pretty big family in the Atmore area. My mom's one of four sisters, and so my mom's oldest sister, Renee Wilkins, was a teacher also in the community, worked for the school board for a long time. Her next oldest sister, Vicki James, works for the utility board, and I think is is close to retirement after a really long career with the city of Atmore. And then my mom's younger sister, Tracy Hodgen, works at First National Bank, and my mom is also getting ready to retire. Tammy Smith, after a long time teaching PE at Rachel Patterson.
Okay. Okay. You mentioned the Lathams. Joe Latham was my football coach in high school, and of course, I ran into Miss Latham just the other day. She's like 97 or something. She's getting up there, but she still was very curious. In fact, as I talked with her for a minute, she said, "Oh, I know you Auburn boys. You used to ride with Joe to school, didn't you?" Yeah, we sure did.
Yeah, I've heard Miss Latham is still out and about and still doing great, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
just really good to hear.
Yeah, and still looks good too. She's a beautiful lady, always was. I always thought she and Joe were kind of mismatched a little bit. You know, he was sort of a rough around the edges, tobacco chewing coach. You know, and she was just such she was taller than he, and she was such an elegant lady. They just never seemed to match, but I guess they did. Now,
Well,
Stephanie,
back in Mississippi, I don't know. There might not have been a lot of other people around. My grandmother used to say she got tired of dating the Mississippi boys and came into Atmore and then fell in love.
well, Joe was certainly different and charming, and he was a great football player. So, football players always get the girls.
That's true.
Now, Stephanie, I'm sorry to be ignoring you for a minute there, but let me just ask you a question. Are you still there?
I sure am.
Okay. Now, are you political like Trey? Or how did you guys happen to meet at a political function or something? Or tell me a little bit about you.
It's so funny that you say that, because you would think me, the girl that has grown up in and around Washington D.C. her whole life, would be absolutely, all into politics and so astute in that way. And it's so funny because really to date, I haven't been. I would consider myself very average on the political spectrum as it comes to following it and being intelligent around that. But what I can say is, since dating Trey for the last year or so, oh my goodness, has my political IQ risen. So it's still not to any impressive level, but relative to prior to knowing Trey, I am a much more kind of equipped and astute American citizen, that is for sure. And it's actually been really, really fun. Like, could you imagine just, sitting on the couch every day with, someone that could teach you all the things about all the people, the places, the history. And so I am getting smarter and smarter by the day. But it was definitely not my natural inclination. I think how Trey kind of consumes politics and historical information, I feel like I do that a little bit more on maybe the sports spectrum and kind of other interests and things like that. Maybe not quite as useful, but we're definitely very different in that respect.
Did you guys meet in college or were?
No, so actually we owe my brother-in-law big time. So I have one older sister, Jackie DeVore, and she is married to Andrew, and he worked with Trey at a prior firm. And so they worked together for many years from different cities, but definitely knew each other well. And I adore my brother-in-law deeply and trust him very, very much. And so when he suggested that I meet his coworker, Trey Smith, I said, you know what? Heck, why not? And so he introduced us just over a year ago, and I'm so thankful that he did.
Was it love at first sight? Or did
Pretty
he have to
close.
grow on you a little bit?
Well, no, I have to say it was pretty good. But to Trey's credit, what I tell people is that I think in today's digital age, there's a lot of texting and sending messages back and forth and this and that. But no, the gentleman that is Trey Smith got my number and just shot me a message and said, "Hey, can I call you tonight?" And I was like, "Absolutely." That is a rare thing in today's world of all the digital tools and things that we have. And so he gave me a call, which was a huge first kind of check mark in the box. And then he flew to DC for our first date. So I have to say, he started off very, very strong.
What are you a career girl? Are you?
I am.
What's your specialty? Your major?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to the University of Maryland, College Park, go Terps for my undergraduate degree, and I studied finance. To be honest, I liked business. I liked the fact that it incorporated a lot of things. I don't think I'm particularly amazing at any one thing, but I like the combination of math and writing and marketing and artistic elements and people and all the different things. So I went to the Smith School of Business at Maryland, graduated with a degree in finance and supply chain management. I am now a financial consultant at a large public accounting firm where I do valuations. I help privately held businesses figure out how much they're worth, which is pretty fun to just kind of learn, especially a lot of like founders of businesses and figure out, what do you do? How do you do it? How do you do it well? How did you start it? And what is that business worth and what does that mean to you, which is pretty cool. So I have a lot of fun doing that. And as you can imagine, being here in the DC area, I work with a lot of government contractors, so businesses that sell products and services to the federal government. So I spend a lot of my time advising those businesses as well. So it's been pretty fun. So it's been cool with Trey, because again, he's in the business world too, but in a very different context, like different industry, different, clearly legal is very different, but yet there's a lot of crossover there. So it's been fun for us to kind of, compare our careers and work through those things together.
Now, I don't want to tip anybody off that I'm not supposed to, but it's my understanding now. I don't want to call any names, but Bonnie Latino comes to mind. I'll give you her initials. I understand you guys are considering your wedding ceremony back here in Atmore. Is that?
We sure
is
are.
That true?
We sure are. I pretty much insisted on it, to be honest.
Did
so
you?
I've had the pleasure of visiting Atmore a few times over the past year, and I've just loved it. And don't get me wrong, I love the DMV. I love the DC area where I've grown up. There's a lot of great positives about it, but I had never experienced community quite like I have when I visited Atmore. I joke that you can't go anywhere without being seen, right? You go pick up a cup of coffee and all of a sudden everyone knows that you're in town. But I love it. I could go to the same coffee shop every single day in DC, order the same thing with the same barista, and that person still probably wouldn't know my name. But that is not Atmore, Alabama. And everyone was just so welcoming and so sweet. And so while obviously I'm marrying Trey because I love him, he brings an amazing family and community with him that is huge. And so when I thought about kind of celebrating such a big event in our lives and knowing that we don't live in Atmore and we don't get to be there all the time, I was like, this is a pretty cool opportunity to celebrate with a lot of people who love and have invested in Trey and even me just over the last year. And so I felt like that would be a ton of fun, and we're really looking forward to it.
Now, Trey, I'm just going to take a wild leap. You were happy about that?
I was very happy, although I think Stephanie can back me up on this. I held out for a while. I wanted to make sure it was something that she really wanted before we started lining everything up because I told her a ceremony in Atmore, in a lot of ways it's much simpler because um, you don't just securing a place to get married and all of those things. Things can be very stressful in a big city like DC in a way that they're not in a smaller area. But on the other hand, obviously, a lot of complications. I mean, people traveling from Maryland, there's no real close airport. People have got to drive. There's a lot of logistics to line up. We got my whole family there, my mom there. Just a lot of things to weigh, and so I wanted to make sure it was something that Stephanie really wanted to do, and of course, I you know I was pretty much willing to accept anything in terms of the wedding ceremony after my first idea was rejected, which was that we just talk to our preacher here, maybe go to the courthouse that Monday after we got engaged and just sign all the papers then and get it all out of the way. That was my only idea, and it was rejected, and I expected it to be. And so then when it came to where we wanted to do it, I just wanted to make sure it was exactly what Stephanie wanted, and I was very happy when she decided to go with that.
Okay. Uh, Now, Trey, I don't want to move too. There's a couple of things I want to go back to because your writing prowess with the Atmore Advance is the thing that I know you for. But now I understand that you had some other accomplishments in your school days. Maybe you could just hit the highlights of some of your other accomplishments during your school years before we leave that era and move on to where you are now. Tell me a little bit about some of your other accomplishments. Now, this I particularly want you to address because I heard this. I think Bonnie probably told me this. You were going to the academy out here, a private school here in Atmore, and you actually went to your parents and requested that you could go to the public school so that you could get a more balanced perspective on life. Is that anywhere close to the truth?
Uh, I don't remember what all my motivations were as a 15-year-old. Back in Atmore, back in the day. I I think a more balanced perspective on life. I hope that that's what I was looking out for. I grew up with a lot of people at the private school, a lot of whom are still really close friends today. But when I was in high school, I did ask my parents, and I think my parents were very favorable towards it and may have already been thinking in that direction, about graduating from the high school, which I ended up doing and was very happy to have done. I had some good friends also at the high school. I think it it was a good move for me at the time. Just I graduated with a good group of people, ended up going with some of the same people I went to the high school with, going to the University of Alabama with. Um, I graduated from Alabama as a journalism major, and then I went on to law school at Tulane. My dad was very quick to point out the $20 per week I
You
was
couldn't live
making
on
as a
it.
journalist in Atmore before I went to Alabama to become a journalism major, and so that my future as a journalist maybe economically was not bright, but as a writer, he said, you can always go to law school, and so that's what I did. I went to law school, worked in Houston for several years after law school, met Stephanie, and then moved up to DC last summer, where I had been. I spent some time up here when I was in high school and in college, so DC is a city I'm very familiar with.
Did you change? You went to Texas first for your first.
Went to Texas first, yeah.
Now, did you go to D.C. with the same law firm, or did you change firms?
So I was working in the Texas office. Stephanie's brother-in-law, who introduced us, was working in our DC office. And when I moved to DC, I changed law firms. I ended up getting an opportunity. I had been working in Texas a lot on oil and gas, and I had enjoyed that. But wind and solar is gaining so much traction now as sort of a part of the energy mix that when I moved to DC, I was able, really lucky actually, to get.
As when you and I were talking the other day, you mentioned that your legal writing was not quite as exciting as your journalism writing. It was a little bit
Right,
technical.
definitely.
Is it? Did I hear
Something.
boring or? I mean,
Well,
is this you're working in contracts? You told me, so that
I
sounds a
do.
little boring.
I work in contracts. It's not boring for me. I think it would be boring for anyone else to read it when it's done. I enjoy it a lot, but I think the difference between being a sort of a contract writer and a columnist, when you're a columnist, when you work at a newspaper, really when you're any type of journalist, you're trying to get clicks, you're trying to get ads or get eyes that will sell ads. You want to have engaging material that people will read. When you have a contract, you just want to make sure that your client's risk are well defined and to any extent that they need to be protected. So it's a very different type of writing.
Do you, typically, and I have grown children, and my wife has grown children. One of her sons ended up in South Dakota. Why? Well, because he married a girl from South Dakota. And sometimes when two people get married from different parts of the country, it seems like to me, now I could be wrong, it seems like to me they usually end up where the girl lives. Do you guys expect to ever come back to Alabama to live, or have you thought that far ahead?
I, I guess I'll take that. I don't think we have thought that far ahead. Like Stephanie mentioned earlier, having a being in a big city offers so many advantages. I think, especially right now at this point for both of us career wise. Stephanie is in government contracting, like she said. I'm in the legal field, which DC and New York have probably a disproportionate number of the nation's lawyers, maybe too many lawyers. And so this is a really good place for us to be. And obviously, being in a city, you get a lot of the museums and culture and friends that we have here. It's exciting. We have both of us, I think, different people in our industries and our fields in DC that we can go get breakfast with, go get lunch with, learn from, bounce ideas off of in a way that is really beneficial. And then also long term, you think, well, really great school districts here. If you have kids or have a family, there are some good options. Now, there are also some big drawbacks, obviously. Big cities can be expensive. And I think with the pandemic, we've seen a rise in remote working where people, especially more senior people, have really figured out they can do their jobs from anywhere and are dispersing across the country. And you think in Alabama, where I have such a good family network, a good community, such a strong sense of community, that's the good part of being in Alabama, right? In smaller cities, smaller towns, you have that sense of community that's harder to get here. So long term, I mean, what would make the most sense? It's really hard to even think about. I feel like we're so fortunate that we sort of get to have our feet a little bit in both worlds, and I don't know, what will end up happening. It's definitely not something that's out of the realm of possibility.
Well, certainly, when I was young, I was adventuresome and not afraid to get out and see the world. In fact, I never got saw as much as I wanted to see, but I did see quite a bit of it. But as you get older, you kind of have a hankering to come back home. I'm here now. I moved back here in 2008, I think I mentioned earlier, because all my family are here, my family roots, and at this stage of my life, I rather enjoy it. Atmore, it seems to me, is becoming more and more of an older person town. A lot of the young people leave to find jobs and so forth, but a lot of older people come from other states, and they just love it because there seems to be more of a senior lifestyle here. So maybe there's hope for you guys when you get old. Maybe you'll come back here and retire.
That's always possible. I will say the one thing which I complained about to Stephanie about Houston extensively, and I still feel it when I'm at home, and I don't think growing up made it any easier, is just July and August. That's the one thing that I think we have much better up here than in South Alabama. Now, the one the flip side of that is right now, where it's 25 degrees outside, so we're all bundled up. I'm sure you all are in a much better situation, and you don't have any ice on the roads.
Yes, I've lived in cold climates, and the last one was in Colorado. I lived for a number of years, and when I left Colorado, it was in the middle of a snowstorm, and I don't think I thawed out till I got to Texas. And it's just wonderful to be able to get out on the road and drive without having to slide into everything. I'm not a big fan
Yes.
of snow. It's beautiful to look out the window at, but you get some snow up in D.C. too as well, and some cold weather.
We had a big snow day Monday, actually. Stephanie and I walked down to the White House, because for me it's so new, right? It's old news for her, but for me, getting to walk around in the snow for a day was really an experience because I haven't done it that often.
Trey, your interest in politics earlier on, you wanted to be a page for Joe Bonner, and you were persistent, and you got there. How'd you like? How was that experience? Did it fulfill what you thought it was, or how influential was that experience to you as far as going forward?
Yeah, it's amazing now looking back on it. I can't overstate how influential it was. I mean, I had friends from around the country for the first time, friends who were very different from me, had grown up in very different uh, neighborhood cities, people from the San Francisco Bay Area, Chicago, and it was eye-opening for me, and I have a lot of really good relationships from that program. And in fact, a lot of the people who were pages with me, that was in the fall of 2007. We spent one semester doing it. We were all 16, 17 years old, but a lot of them have returned to the DC area, and I've been able to see a lot of them since I moved back up here. Still have a lot of good friends, people in law, people in campaigns. One is actually running for Congress right now in Kansas. So a good group of people, a good group of contacts, and it really did just expose me to so much. And now that I'm back here in DC, I sort of know my way around the city still, even though it's obviously changed a lot in the intervening years. And I've got a network here of people who hopefully, as the pandemic subsides and I get used to the rhythms of living here, I'll be able to spend even more time with, because they're people that I really like and are really special to me because we were together so long ago, and I think it's the first big thing that any of us had ever done.
Are you politically active there? It would seem that would be a good place to be politically active. What's your
Yeah,
political life like now in DC?
Stephanie will probably laugh when I say this, but I'm really not political. I've been pretty apolitical since I went to law school and focused on focused just on getting a legal education and then practicing law. So to say that I'm not political, to Stephanie, she probably laughs because I talk about politics all the time, and I'm always coming up with ideas about museums we should go to and things we should do or movies we should watch, and they're all political. And I know sometimes I can be too political, but in terms of actual political activity, it's hard, when you're balancing a career and trying to also now plan a wedding and you want to focus on sort of the things that God.
Yeah, you cut off there. Are you still there?
Um, I don't really do any political work.
Oh, I see. Well, Stephanie, what do you say? Do you see politics in Trey's future?
I think one of my favorite things about Trey about marrying Trey is the optionality associated with his life. I could see it going in so many directions because he really does have quite the skill set. I see him thoroughly enjoying what he does now and doing it well and being able to do some of the crazy, complex, nuanced, detailed legal work that, oh my gosh, gives me a headache just thinking about it. But at the same time, I see kind of his interest and his investment in people and communities and around him. And so I'm not willing to bet too much money on either side of the coin or a bunch of other options in between, because I could really see Trey just ending up in any of those worlds. And I think that's the fun thing too, is that we've got a long life ahead of us, right? And so I think that there's a lot of time, and I certainly wouldn't be shocked by it. That's for sure.
Well, it's hard to read the future, and there are many, many things that I said I would never do that I ended up doing. I moved to New York. I lived in New York for 7 or 8 years, and that's something I never saw myself doing. Something that just happened suddenly in my work career, and there I was. I was in New York. So we never know how things are going to end up. But the material, the Trey, that you're made of, I see some possibilities. I guess it would just be questioning whether you would be a senator from Alabama or a senator from Maryland or Virginia or somewhere. But
Well,
you know,
thank you. I do. I mean, I have to say, obviously, I love what I've been doing in practicing law. I'm an energy lawyer, and helping people get energy, I think, is going to be a huge challenge for my generation because everything we have, every benefit of modern life comes from energy, from having a good supply of energy. And we look at countries that are trying to get people out of poverty around the world, and developing sustainable sources of energy for those people is going to be a key to raising living standards, raising lifespans, raising healthcare outcomes. And so it's fun, and I like it, but I do have a special place, obviously, also in my heart for politics. I mean, I love the debates, the public policy aspect. I have a lot of respect for people out there who are already in public service, who are my age or older people in public service, and there's part of me that I think will not rest or not go to retirement until I do some type of public service or something to try to make a difference, because I do have such a passion for it. And whether that's retiring and getting a job, just totally doing something else, I don't know. Like Stephanie said, it's a lot to think about. It's hard to project, but doing some sort of work in the public sphere, I think at some point in my life is something I'm going to have to seriously think about and figure out what that looks like.
well, it seems to me, there's an old joke. It said goes something like this. The Catholics say the Pope says, and the Baptists say the Bible says, and I think maybe the Presbyterians always say, "Well, it seems to me." but it but it seems to me like a lot of politicians are lawyers, Now, I don't know where they just run out of jobs for lawyers and they go into politics. But in fact, lawyers often don't practice law. Knew a lawyer that worked at the post office, and it never hurts them to have that background. But certainly politicians, a lot of lawyers in there. Would that be an accurate observation?
I think that
And why do you
they're
think that
absolutely
happens?
are. It's interesting. I think that there are a lot of sort of reasons. If you look at Congress and sort of what the occupation of people, what their occupation is before they go into Congress, overwhelmingly it's law. The most popular or the number one occupation is law. I think people interested in public policy, in sort of how do you balance competing priorities, competing points of view. I think law is a natural field that attracts those people. And so they get law degrees, and then maybe they run out of jobs. Maybe we're not always getting from the top of the barrel when we get get into politics. But a lot of people give up very good careers as lawyers to go into politics and end up probably sacrificing a good deal financially. But I think those are people that have a concern about the country, and they want to do what they can to help. I think if you look at the presidents that we've had in my lifetime, all of the Democrats have been lawyers. The Republicans haven't, but it's definitely Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, all were originally lawyers. And if you go back far enough, you can get Nixon. He was a lawyer. Obviously, President Kennedy and the Kennedys all had legal backgrounds. So you can see even bipartisan sort of overwhelming correlation on a bipartisan basis with legal backgrounds. And most of those people, I think, do a little bit different type of legal work than what I do. A lot of them tend to be in the criminal justice system, or they tend to be doing litigation or some sort of legal advising for the government. But there are always people who have sort of a more business legal background that find ways into the public sphere as well.
Well, after all, Congress does make the laws, don't they?
They do, and it is nice to know that some of them have legal backgrounds.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Stephanie, you mentioned that you enjoyed visiting Atmore in the small town attitudes and atmosphere and so forth. Trey, do you miss Atmore? Do you ever miss home? Or you
Stephanie
get homesick?
Stephanie can probably talk about this better than I can. I don't think I ever get homesick because even at 17, I had to leave Atmore to come be a page, which is what I wanted to do. So over the time, you just sort of get in the rhythm of being in Atmore, some being in whatever city you're in at the moment, some. But I can never wait to go back to Atmore. Early on during the pandemic, I was still in Houston, and when things sort of shut down, I spent months working from Atmore just because I was able to be with my family, help my grandmother that, we wanted to keep her isolated from the virus until the vaccines came out. And so we were able, I was able to help in that way. And there I was, 30 years old, and just back living in Atmore, where I never really thought I'd be, but I loved every minute of it. So I do. I miss Atmore. I love going back to Atmore. Sometimes I love leaving Atmore and coming back to D.C. because when you're in Atmore, when you're in D.C., like Stephanie was saying, people don't really know who you are. You can kind of hide for a while when you're in Atmore, especially if you don't get down there very often, like I. You come home for a week and it's bam, bam, bam. You got a lot of people you want to see, a lot of things you want to do, and I end up just being tired, really, after being there. But it's because we're seeing so many people doing so many things that we want to do, and we love every minute of it. So it's always exciting to get back home.
Right. Well, my wife's son here a couple of years ago in South Dakota, he was coming down for a visit, and he asked his mother, "Well, I've got so many people I want to see. Do you think Grandpa would lives in Walnut Hill? Do you think he would? Maybe we could just have a little get together, and they could come over to your house, and I could visit with them." And she said, "No, he won't do that." Old people won't do that. My father was the same way. When I lived in New York, I offered to fly him out there to, he said, I didn't lose anything in New York. I felt like I said, well, what about me? You lost me. But
Right.
it is difficult when you live away from home to come home and see everybody. It just really wears you out, trying to see everybody. And then the ones you don't see, you say, well, why didn't he come see me? So
Well, and I think a
it's
lot of times
challenging.
the ones you don't see, I think people who are from Atmore, who have lived in Atmore their whole life, it's hard to appreciate for them what it's like if you're more on our side of the fence, where you come home, you got 3 days, you got a week, what that's really like, especially when you're working, and now your laptop just follows you everywhere, your phone follows you everywhere. You're never really, I think, for Stephanie and me, neither one of us are ever really off the clock, because you got that phone. Your employers know you have the phone, and people are moving so fast in trying to get deals closed, get things done. So you go back home for a week, but you're not on vacation. You're not off the clock, and
You're
it,
always
it does
working.
become real difficult. Yeah.
Well, I guess the positive side of that would be that you can take a little vacation and carry on if you have to. It's a little more
Exactly.
difficult.
Exactly. That's the huge upside.
Yeah. So when's the wedding? When's the big date?
I, Steph has carried most of the wedding planning, and has really been doing a good job getting everything going. I was gonna give her the first shot.
Yeah, sure thing. So yeah, we are getting married the first weekend in June of 2022. So I think, I don't know, to
Okay.
some people you talk to, multiple months of engagement isn't enough, and others have been engaged for 2 years and need a ton of time to plan a wedding. And we look to figure out, okay, we want to be married. How quickly could we be married feasibly, and kind of get all the ducks in a row and figuring it out? So yeah, so early June, we're super excited. There's definitely we've got a lot of planning under our belt. Still a decent more to go, but it's been fun, and it's been a really enjoyable process working with, even from afar, a lot of the different vendors that we're working with, whether they're in Atmore or in Mobile or in Pensacola or the surrounding area. It's been great, and so I'm still feeling that kind of community touch in terms of customer service, even though I'm not even in Atmore right now. So it's been a really enjoyable process. But yeah, as of June 4th, we will be Mr. and Mrs. Smith officially.
Sounds like it's going to be a really big shoe.
Yeah, it's funny. I tell people something I did not realize is the smaller the town, the bigger the wedding. But no, it's been. I think it's going to be a great time. I mean, I think anyone who's planned a wedding can probably tell you that it's certainly challenging, and we just feel so. Gosh, we have the best problems in the world, right? Like there are just so many people that we love, that love us dearly. That or want to be part of the day, and so we're doing our best to do that. And it is such an ordeal, and I have to say I had very low expectations for my crew from Maryland, right? Because I'm like, I know I'm being difficult, I know I'm getting married across the country in a small town that none of y'all have ever heard of, and so don't worry, we'll have opportunities to celebrate up here up north, so don't feel any pressure to come down to Alabama. And I just keep getting people being like, we can't wait, we have heard so much about this town Atmore, and we can't wait to come see it. And so all of a sudden I'm like, oh man, all my Maryland people, a lot of them they're actually coming, and so we're pretty excited. I think it'll be pretty cool, and I don't know, I'm excited for parts of my family and my friends to really get the Atmore experience too.
Well, I know that I am, and I know a lot of other people, us seniors, are awful proud of the young people who have gone on. We hate to lose them. We'd love to see them stay here in Atmore, but they move on, and when we're proud of them. I was talking to a lady the other day, my age group. She has a daughter who's a neurosurgeon, and she's practicing now. She's a accomplished neurosurgeon, and for these young people that come to Atmore and go out and make something of themselves, it really makes us proud. The job that you do, and we're certainly proud of Trey. I had Phil Johnson on the program here several weeks ago. He's founded and started this Gecko Theater Group, community theater, and just does a wonderful job with it. But he was telling me about all of the people who had come over to participate in the Gecko shows that they had put on. How many of them had gone on to New York or Nashville and had become accomplished in the music business. Maybe not big stars, but working and accomplished in the music business. So I don't even know what that number is, but I suspect it's larger than what I know. And we're certainly proud of Trey for what he did here in Atmore, his accomplishments, and he's got family still here. You say Tammy is your mother? Is she still working?
Yes, she's my mother. She's still working at Rachel Patterson, at least through the end of this school year. But I have to say, on that note, I feel like it's easy to take for granted what you have, and when you're a kid, you don't always really appreciate it or know it. But looking back now, for people that grew up in Atmore and have gone on to move other places or do other things or take on tough jobs, I have to say I think that we couldn't have had a better place to grow up and a better, more supportive community, and that really does mean a lot, because you look and I've got a lot of smart friends, hardworking friends, people doing big stuff, but not all of them have that sense of community behind them, and it's really special to think about just what a privilege it was to grow up in Atmore with the people there, just people supporting me, reading my columns even though I was a teenager, and like you said, this is a teenager writing in the newspaper, how did this happen? But people just had faith in me. They were willing to take a chance. The Bonnie Latinos and Michelle Gerlachs even of the world, who Michelle gave me the opportunity, but then my Aunt Bonnie, as I called her, would help me if I had any questions about writing or how does this sound or what we should do, just going back and forth. And then, schools, teachers, friends, family, churches. I mean, you have such an overwhelming sense of community on so many levels. And it's something I may not have appreciated as much as I should have then, but I do appreciate it a lot now when I look back on it.
Well, are there any highlights that I have? We've got about 6 or 7 minutes left on our conversation. Are there any highlights that I'm missing? I'm sure Bonnie is going to chastise me after she hears this. You should ask him about this or that. But now, just so you know, I did ask Bonnie to come on and co-host the program with me, and she's having some health problems right now. She wasn't able to do that right at the moment, but I would have loved to have had her on, so I wouldn't leave out anything, which I'm sure I am. So, are there any highlights that you'd like to salutations as far as Atmore? Hello to Grandma or Mom and Dad or anything?
Oh yeah, for sure. My grandmother, she we want to give a shout out to her. She when I got engaged, my grandmother is now 95, and her memory is not as strong as it was a couple of years ago. And so when I told her about Stephanie, she said, "Well, where's she from?" And I said, "Maryland." And she said, "Well, Maryland, that's still in the South." and so that's been a frequent topic of conversation, how Maryland is borderline the South. and we can still claim it. And I think that makes her happy. She's also asked very, very frequently whether Stephanie intends to become a Presbyterian or not. That has been another big topic of conversation.
Are you Catholic? Are you Catholic, Stephanie? What are you?
No,
Baptist?
well, I did. I did grow up Catholic for many years, and then have been really more on the non-denominational Christian side here at some pretty awesome churches here in Maryland and Virginia. But had the honor of officially becoming a member of Grace DC, a Presbyterian church here in DC, alongside Trey, which was super cool, super fun. Also, for DC, has a pretty great, seems to be well-knit community. So that was a pleasure, and I'm sure Nini is elated by that, but so am I.
Well, I'm sure you'll work that out. Although it's not to be taken lightly. Being on the same page, even if you're not in the same church, being philosophically on the same page, I believe is important. To be able to
absolutely.
share your core philosophies.
Absolutely, and that was a big thing. I know my brother-in-law that introduced us knew kind of the foundations that both Trey and I came from, and it's critically important, and that's been super fun too. So in the same way that Trey has challenged me and taught me all about politics and history and all kinds of things, we have some pretty awesome theological discussions, and whether that be more from a academic perspective or more of a walking it out, right? And how do we take this life and this insane amount of blessings that we feel like we've given and steward them well. And so he challenges me in that way too, which has been so fun. And so I've just appreciated it, and I'm so thankful for it. And hopefully we can do it as well as we can by the grace of God.
Well, my love is for psychology. I have a psychology degree, and I teach psychology at the community college adjunct, and so I can read your mind. And and after talking with you for this hour, I think I agree with Bonnie. I think you're both just probably off the charts in your intellect and personality as well. So it's just been a grand old time. I appreciate you sharing this time with me. I know you're both two busy young people, and for you to share this time with us, I think Atmore's going to be interested in the show. And by the way, the show will air Saturday, not September, where we had January the 8th, Saturday at 10 a.m. And for those of you who are listening in, we will be archiving the show on our YouTube channel a little bit later. So you'll be able to go there and pick it up if somebody misses it. So,
well, thank you. It's been a pleasure, and it's just been great to talk to you, Mr. Albritton, get to connect with people back home, get to introduce them to Stephanie, who I've just been God really laid a great blessing in my lap and at my feet, opened a door for me to walk through when he brought Stephanie and me together. We're looking very forward to our wedding, and the fact that people back home will get to celebrate with us, and just we know we've got so much love and support, and it's always great to think about Atmore, to talk to people in Atmore, and I thank you for the opportunity to be on the show.
Well, maybe we'll be able to meet you personally when you're down here, although you'll probably be very busy. But in any event, Trey Smith and his darling fiance, Stephanie. Stephanie, what's your last name now? You might not.
Johnson. So I found a way to go from one of the most common last names in the world to another one of the most common last names in the world. This was my one chance, but here I am going from Stephanie Johnson to Stephanie Smith.
So, hey, well, you made a big change there. Y'all sure you're not first cousins?
Yeah. I sure hope not.
Thank you, guys. It's been wonderful talking with you, and thank you for sharing this time. God bless, and the best of luck to both of you.
Thanks, Mr. Albritton.
Absolutely. Same to you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Lloyd and Friends Show. Lloyd Overton.